Good morning. I am Robin Fulton Meyer, NAWIC parliamentarian, and hopefully joining us a little bit later will be Sharon Atkins, our NAWIC Bylaws chair. This presentation has been prepared for the National Association of Women in Construction and will be recorded and utilized for training purposes. It will be posted on the national website under Member Center, Toolbox, YouTube channel. By remaining on this conference call, you are giving consent to recording this session. Please hold all questions until the end of the presentation. Many years ago, I did a presentation on Robert's Rules of Order, easy as 1, 2, 3, and then a second presentation, Robert is my friend. Now, these titles were picked to somehow give the illusion of parliamentarian procedure being fun and easy to use. The sad thing for me, I think they are. Today, I have been asked to help make the distinction between bylaws, standing rules, and policies. I hope to make the job easier by explaining the difference between the various documents and also help you in understanding parliamentary procedure as well as Robert's. You see, I really do believe that Robert is our friend. Bylaws and standing rules detail specific policies and procedures to be followed by the decision makers in the conduct of business. Despite having the same functional objective, these two instruments complement each other and are not interchangeable. First, let's start with bylaws. Bylaws are the written rules agreed upon by the people in charge of the organization to formalize how decisions can be made and business conducted. Bylaws are a negotiated agreement and part of the management of the organization as a whole. Bylaws are designed to be overarching and procedural. Provisions in the bylaws always supersede any standing rule or policy that may be adopted. After adopting a set of bylaws, an organization can decide to further supplement and clarify the bylaws. Standing rules are the rules that are a continuing or standing nature. These rules deal only with administrative matters and function under the umbrella of the organization's bylaws. Remember earlier when I said that bylaws are designed to be overarching and procedural? Standing rules are specific and administrative. Standing rules are a piece of advice on how to act in a given situation. They provide for the day-to-day operation of the chapter. Standing rules make frequent or common actions simpler and provide for fairness and continuity of decisions. And then finally, we have policies. Policies are a series of detailed steps to accomplish an end or step-by-step instructions for implementation. Today, we are talking about NAWIC, and the discussion will focus specifically on NAWIC bylaws, standing rules, and policies. NAWIC has two sets of bylaws, the NAWIC National Bylaws and the Standard Bylaws for affiliated chapters. For the purposes of today's discussion, we're focusing on the Standard Bylaws for affiliated chapters. Chapters cannot change these bylaws. Standing Rules 1 through 6 have been set by the National Board for all chapters. They cannot be changed and must appear exactly as adopted by the National Board in your chapter standing rules. Additional rules are then adopted by each chapter to fit that chapter. For example, Standing Rule number 1 tells that a chapter shall adopt standing rules stating its dues, fees and charges, meeting date, and method of voting for officers, delegates, and propositions. And then it goes on a little bit. Because of Standing Rule number 1, chapters need to adopt additional rules that answer those questions. For example, giving what their dues are, what their fees are. They adopt a standing rule that states their meeting date. Policies and procedures then follow the standing rules, calling out the procedure that the chapter will use. Policies cannot be in conflict with the bylaws or standing rules. Let's get to some specific examples that deal with NAWIC. The affiliated chapter bylaws state how many general meetings of the association are held each year. The chapter standing rules then tell when that general meeting is held for that chapter. The bylaws give the officers and directors that each chapter can have. The chapter adopts a standing rule that tells which ones they will elect for their chapter. Again, the bylaws state that elections must be held to elect the officers and directors. The chapter adopts a standing rule that tells how they're going to hold their elections. In this case, we have either in chapter meeting or via mail ballot. The policies then would lay out the steps for the chapter elections. For example, if a chapter chooses to hold their elections via mail ballot, the standing rule would state that the chapter elections will be by mail ballot. The chapter would then adopt a policy stating how the chapter plans to conduct the mail ballot. Bylaws state that chapter dues and other fees shall be established by the chapter. You then adopt a standing rule that tells what your particular dues and fees are for your chapter. These would be examples of policies adopted by a chapter that deal with its chapter scholarship. These are policies, not standing rules. Here's an example of a chapter's policy on charitable deductions. My only caution here to a chapter would be to ensure that the core purpose of NAWIC, to enhance the success of women in construction, is always behind their decisions. In the current NAWIC year, chapters in the Pacific Northwest, South Atlantic, South Central, and Southeast regions are required to submit their standing rules to NAWIC Bylaw Chair Sharon Atkins. If a chapter in any one of the other 4 regions make a change to their standing rules, they would also be required to submit to Chair Atkins. I hope that this clears up some of the confusion of bylaws versus standing rules versus policies. The more we understand the inner workings of the association, the easier things run on a day-by-day practice. I will now unmute everyone and we can go into question and answer. If you're on the phone, if you dial *6, you can get in the queue to ask a question, or if you're on online, you can click the Q&A button from the toolbar. Okay, I have a question from a 615.
Yes, this is Andrea Ward. I was just wondering, do policies have to be written or are they just understood?
They can be either. It just depends on how detailed it needs to be. For example, if we're talking about a mail ballot, I think that would be a policy that would better serve the chapter if it was written. An example of one that could just be understood that I don't think necessarily has to be would be, say your chapter has a policy that for your annual regional forum that the chapter buys a corsage for the president to attend the banquet. That can be something that's just an understood policy. It doesn't have to be written down. So I think it's kind of, if it's a more detailed thing like a mail ballot, I think that it would be better for the chapter if it was written down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any others with questions? Okay, I have one from area code 585.
Robin, this is Carrie. I just wanted Jillian to know that I was here. She signed in after I did.
Okay. Very good.
So no question. I just wanted her to know that I was here.
Okay, thank you. All right, area code 804.
Hi, Robin. I have a question regarding policies and the term guidelines. The South Atlantic region's policies and guidelines will be addressed at our fall conference, and we now have a breakout to review guidelines for our South Atlantic Region Director Fund guidelines and Event Fund guidelines as separate documents. I'm a little confused on how, I'm the parliamentarian for the region, and I'm confused on how these are going to be presented and accepted. End of question. Very red shape.
No problem. Have they been circulated to the region?
Yes, they have.
Okay. That's how they've been circulated to the region. So you come together as a region at your annual planning fall conference, and they are presented. I would assume you would have either your fund trustee, they go by different names, guardian, or even your regional director would present these, and any questions, comments would be taken from the floor, and then a vote will be held of the attendees that are voting members of that region that would be able to vote and then accept them at that particular event, and then those would be the ones that would be governing your region.
Okay. That helps. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, I have an online question. Are the guidelines of our chapter the same thing as policies? Darla, they could be, and they probably are. I think it's just a name that they use. You can take a look at those and see if there's anything in particular that needs to be looked at. But yeah, guidelines and policies typically are interchangeable. Do we have any other questions? You guys are making this too easy today. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'm going to stop the recording now.